Good morning.
Good morning, Samson.
Hi, Peter. We spent the last 2 days, Friday night, Saturday, and today at the Bible study, and now talking about raising children in a Christian home. And as I look across and see all those precious little souls, okay, I even count you teenagers, okay, all right, you're precious. And the hope of the future of the church is among us. They are here in just the thought of parents coming together and concerned adults, the loving older adults coming together, just want to think about how we can help them to become a mature disciple of Christ. That warms my heart. That gives us hope as we look to the future of the church. So this morning, this is kind of wrapping up, and as we kind of come to the close of the last few days. So this morning, we're going to summarize, but really looking forward, moving forward as a congregation, as families, and what some of the things that we want to do or need to do. So let me tell you about my family. First of all, a couple of events, you probably can guess what they are. They changed my life. The first one happened in 1984 when Elizabeth came. Of course, we were anticipating, we were really looking for, actually 9 months pregnancy. I don't know why God does that, but 9 months is an eternity, a lifetime when you're waiting. I guess it's worse for Susan than it's for me, probably. But I always envious. How come she got that precious thing in the belly and it got her all anyway? So I remember spending a lot of time singing to her the belly, and talking to the belly. And we just can't wait. But the day when it happened, it was in an evening. I remember as clear as yesterday. I remember I went out. They said, "Oh, it's going to be a while. Go get something to eat." I went across the street. I think went to Burger King or something. And I kind of went back, and I went back, it's like, nobody's there. So all of a sudden, they said, "No, it's happening now, you got to go." So they shoved me in a closet and gave me a gown, and I looked at this green gown, I said, "Okay, I got to figure out how to put this on." And then got into the delivery room. I was Susan holding her hand. Of course, all the commotion, everything was happening. I was so nervous. I couldn't put a gown on right because I was just so nervous, I was shaking. And then I just always, this lovely obstetrician that Susan had, she's an older lady, and I've always thought, I don't think she could do the job. Like, I really didn't think. She just kind of moved like this, right? Very slow, and you know me, I don't move slow. And I was like, okay, there's just no way. Is she going to be handle all this stuff happening? Well, then Elizabeth came. I have never seen anybody move as fast as she did. Oh my goodness. So Elizabeth came out, and just one fast kind of swooping motion, she grabbed her legs, kind of hold her up like a chicken, and made her cry. And I remember that kid's got a set of lungs on her. I thought, oh, wow. Made her cry, and before I could even kind of get a hold of what's happening, she was in my hand. And she was crying, she was in my hand. And I looked at her, and I started talking to her, and instantly she stopped crying. That was cool, right? Now, her eyes are open, not that at that time she wouldn't be able to see, but it's almost like she was just stopped and recognized the voice, at least this is what I'm thinking, and checking me out. Okay, is this guy going to be okay to me, my dad? This is the biggest mistake in my life, you know? And then I look at this precious soul that's in my arm, right? The bond's instant. You guys, your parents, you know that, right? It's at the bond, it's instant. And you know there's all kinds of commotion happening. They were attending Susan. And just me and her. It was almost the whole world was shut down. And I still remember she was growing up, she was sleeping, I was sneaking to the room, standing next to her crib, and just stare at her for hours on end. while she's sleeping. It just, there's nothing that describe that feeling. But that God gave us this precious gift. And then 4 years later, 5 years later actually, Michael came in 1989. We adopted Michael, so that's a second event that just changed my life. So Michael came, the circumstances was very different because we adopted him from Hong Kong. The process was excruciating to adopt a child. And it took well over a year, many meetings, many red tapes, many processes. Finally, the day came. It was in November 1989. It was in November, and we had a choice. Susan had a choice whether we would fly to Hong Kong. We adopted him from an orphanage in Hong Kong. We would fly to Hong Kong, pick him up, bring him back, or we will pay a chaperone that would bring him to meet us, but they will only come to New York, so we're gonna have to find a way to Newark Airport to go pick him up. And Susan and I decided we will meet him in Newark because if we have to go there and back, like the time difference and time change, like, and then all of us going to be out of sort. So in this case, at least the two adults will be kind of in some kind of sanity while looking after a new baby. So both Susan and I had no idea what to expect. We knew we were getting very anxious because we were getting report that this little guy, Michael, was exhibiting very worrying symptoms in the orphanage because of being institutionalized. And so I really wanted to get him, but we just couldn't get through all the red tapes. So, but finally this day arrived. So we flew to Newark, got a hotel because they were going to come in very late at night, so we had to stay over. And we made our way to the Newark airport. And what we saw as he came out with a chaperone was just heartbreaking. Just heartbreaking. But can you imagine just what happened to this little boy? He was about 18 months old by then. So he was given up by his mother, so his whole life was in this orphanage. I visited the orphanage. It was on the 4th floor of an apartment building, concrete floors, and you walk in, huge room. There was over 90 stainless steel cribs, and they were jam-packed. In Hong Kong, right, the density is huge. So these 90 plus, I think in 94 and 96 cribs were packed right next to each other. There were 4 caretakers to look after the entire floors. I was there, I made a mistake to be there at feeding time. It was like whether the child is ready to eat or not, really made no difference. 4 people, 4 ladies feed 90-some kids in a span of whatever time. So they just shove it in, a certain quantity, done this one, pick up the next one. And so he was in that environment. So the only persons that he knew was probably the baby on the right and the baby on the left. And they weren't allowed to go out because nobody could take them out, so they were inside the entire time. And it's air conditioned the entire time. He was in a chronic bronchial infection. Every time he got he's got another infection, so poor kid. And so he was in that environment, so you can imagine. And then all of a sudden one day, he would pick out all of its crib, gave it to a strange lady, got in this thing called a car, and drove to the airport where he had only really seen the baby on right and left. And then thousands of strangers streaming back and forth. Apparently he never saw a man before because it's all female that attended to him. So he was given to the strange lady and got on this thing called an airplane. So you can imagine this 18-month-old, how frightened he would be. And the thing is, to learn to get any attention in the orphanage, he learned that he had to scream this ear-piercing, blood-curdling scream for him to get any attention. So when they came out to see us at the airport, he was screaming. He latched onto this chaperone, won't let go of her. But of course, she had to give him to us. And there's a blonde lady, a lady with blonde hair, and a man standing there, and we were looking at this scene, and we're supposed to take this child, and he belonged to us now. A chaperone had to catch a next flight to go back home to Hong Kong. And so Susan completely ignored everything, went and grabbed this child and just hugged him while he screamed. Well, then he latched onto Susan. There is no way I could be anywhere near him. Then all of a sudden the scream would come out. So we took him to the hotel that night, and he stared at me and he would scream because this man. We survived that night, got up the next morning, got in an airplane. Susan couldn't go to the bathroom by herself because every time she tried to go to the bathroom, give me Michael, and he would scream. So she had to, airplane bathroom is not that. She had to take Michael with her to go to the bathroom. We came home. Now, I don't know why God made our first meeting was like that. I don't know. But just as he had entrusted a precious soul called Elizabeth to us, he had entrusted this other little soul called Michael to us. And I think as a father, my first thought that struck me was the enormity of the responsibility of being a father. These precious souls that are given to us, it is not up to us to do whatever we want to do. It is not up to us in whichever way you want to raise your child. The instructions being given to us in the Christian home, the very specific instructions being given to us in Ephesians chapter 6. Do not exasperate, do not frustrate your children, but instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord. I don't know how you interpret Scripture, but that is, I'm so glad the language is plain. It is plain. You are parents in a Christian home, this applies to you. Bring them up in the training and the instruction of the Lord. So here we are, we have Elizabeth and we have Michael. That's our job. So the question then is, how do you pattern your daily lives to implement this? How do you do that? How do you go about raising them in the instruction and in the training of the Lord? First thing, just kind of what we've been talking about in the last 2 days, right? First thing is modeling your faith. Live it. Because they're now with you, certainly in the first, say, 15 years or so, they're with you 24/7, every day, every hour with you, and they see what you do. And look at the ultimate of modeling of faith. Look at Jesus. When God sent his only son, he didn't come with a whole truckload of manuscripts. As a matter of fact, as far as we know, he never wrote anything on papyrus. He never written anything in record. The only thing that we knew he wrote was when he swooped down and wrote on the sand when a woman got caught in adultery was being accused. That's the only time it was written he was written anything on the sand. I bet you that didn't stay. But he spent over 3 years to be with a disciple. For what purpose? For the purpose, in the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God. The Word was God. In the beginning, he was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that hath been made. In him was life, and life was the light of all mankind. The light shined in darkness, darkness they overcome it. And then verse 14, the idea of modeling, right? The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. The purpose of him being here is to demonstrate and show us how to live a life that is in complete alignment with the will of God. And so he was there. He was there for all the time with his disciples, and he lived with them. And he spent all the time with them to show them how it can be done. So how can we make that a reality? How do we do that in our own life as we pattern our life after modeling our Lord Jesus Christ? Remember, I would think I don't even know how many years ago, I'm getting too old now. Remember, there's a little bracelet and people wear bandanas and stuff, say WWJD. What would Jesus do? That's what it is, right? What would Jesus do when I'm facing a particular situation? What would Jesus do? And so the 3.5 years that he was here, all the things that he did that written down as a record for us, we can look and see how he did. So as Christians, parents, really what we want is that when our children are faced with situation where it calls for judgment and wisdom, you want them to ask, what would mommy do? What would daddy do? Because that's really what we want them to do, right? And you're modeling, when you're showing them how it can be done, what you want them to do is to stop and ask that question. But you see, Paul said in 1 Corinthians chapter 11:1, he said, as I follow the examples of Christ, you follow my example as I follow the example of Christ. So really, in essence, when the child asks what would mommy or daddy do, really you're reflecting the light back to Jesus. When they ask what mommy and daddy would do, really what you want them then to think is that because you've been demonstrating, modeling your faith, is what would Jesus do? So that is the way to model, to put God's work in practice. But modeling, as we talked about last Tuesday, is not enough. Because not only we have to show them the how, we need to tell them the why. Jamie was just very good in explaining that this morning in our Bible class. You need to tell them the why. Because you see, modeling will work if you know your children are not going to continuously face the same scenarios that you face. Because then they know what to do. But the moment the context change, if they don't know the why, they don't know how to put it in applications. So we have to show them, well, not that we have to show them, we have to tell them the why. There has been I still remember a little story. I think all of you know the story. And the story is that a little girl was looking at the mother baking a ham. And the mom cut off the end of the ham and they put it in the pan and put it in the oven. And the little girl asked the mom, why do you cut off the end? He said, oh, maybe it will soak up the juice better as it bakes. She said, well, actually, I don't know why, because I think that's why. Ask Grandma, because Grandma used to do that. So the little girl called Grandma. Grandma, why do you cut off the end of the ham before you go bake it? She said, well, I think it's because it soaks up juice. But I don't really know. Ask Great Grandma, because that's what she did. So the little girl called Great Grandma. Great Grandma, why do you cut off? Little girl's curious. Why do you cut off the end of the ham when you bake it? And because Mom is doing that, I ask her and I ask Grandma, they don't know. And then she chuckled and said, well, because I didn't have any pans big enough for the ham. Modeling is not good enough if you don't tell them why. Deuteronomy. This morning we were reading Deuteronomy 6 and verse 4 to 9. Powerful verses, right? But in Deuteronomy later on in chapter 20, 21, Moses is telling them why. Why do you do this? Why do you tell your children while you're walking along the street, while you're at home, while you're getting up, while you're going to bed? Why do you have to put it in your doorposts, your houses, and at the gate? Well, you want to because your children is going to ask. When they ask, you tell them that the Lord God had delivered them from Egypt, that the Lord God had cared for them and looked after them, so that they will know that there is a God in Israel. See, teaching, giving them the why, the reasons why you do the things that you do. Now, as you know, teaching is not always easy, especially in difficult scenarios, right? But those are probably the best teachable moment is when things are tough to try to explain. Think about the scenario at the prodigal son, the older brother. We all focus on the younger brother. Think about the older brother. He was coming in the field, he had slaved all day, worked hard, and he came in, heard all this commotion, the big party is going on. What's going on? He asked the servant, what's happening? The servant said, oh, your younger brother who left, he came back, and your dad had slaughtered the fatted calf and having a big party in his honor. Well, he lost it. He lost it. You think about this. His whole life, the father's been teaching them the law that we got to obey, we got to model and doing the same thing about the law. Well, Dad, you're not consistent. Your youngest son had disrespected you, and he deserved death. The law demands death, and yet why are you doing this? This is inconsistent. See, for modeling to be successful, consistency is the key. That you're going to have to repeat the same thing over and over again, and your children learn by repetition. So you're going to have to do that. This is absolutely inconsistent. And he confronted his father. His father explained the why. See, his father told him, oh my goodness, my son, your brother who was dead and is alive, he was lost and is found. You see, the explanation is just as important about the demonstration. So even though when the lesson is difficult, I can tell you, probably the older brother didn't like the answer, didn't feel good about the answer, but you know he understood. He knew now, right? And that's for our children. Well, no, Sunday morning, we don't do that. We're going to go, well, why can't we do that? Let me explain to you why. Well, they might not like sitting here, but at least they understand and they know the reason why we want to meet on Sunday morning. So giving them the why is just as important as showing them how. And the last thing, that is Christian parent raising kids in Christian home, is that our job to integrate them into the Christian communities of which that's appropriate for them. Whether it might be Christian camp, maybe youth rally, youth group, or might be other Christian families with children that you want them to be a part of. Or maybe even a Christian college, or even just a congregation in general. And don't be passive about that. And when you look at the Ephesians 6, when Paul talked about bringing them up in the training instruction of the Lord, it's not a passive phrase. It's an active. So you're going to have to take the initiative. Don't wait for the youth group leader to invite your kid to go out of tent. Sign them up, take them. And, you know, maybe if your kid is a little shy, participate yourself. Go volunteer. Go volunteer with that group. I'm sure you volunteer with that group, with a youth group, that your child is a lot more likely to want to go with you. I remember when we were in Fontaine, when we were living in Fontaine, just got to tell you a story about volunteering or working with. Anyway, we were at Fontaine, and then Susan and I decided that the children need to be more active, kind of participate in more active stuff and learn some skills as well. So I have no idea why, but we decided we should sign them up for karate classes. We know nothing about karate, okay? We know nothing about that. If you look at me, maybe I'm a kung fu master, but okay, I know nothing. So we check it out, we talk to people. We found this local club that apparently is very good. So we thought, okay, so 4 of us, after work, we took them to this club. And then I called them before, and they say, yeah, come and observe a class and see if you guys like it. And if things okay, you can start. So great, okay. So here, work was probably the most important at the time for me. Not a very good father. And so we got there, we watched a class. Of course, the kids just hated it. They didn't want to be there. They were karate. I'm like, where is this coming? So you see, the parents had just some weird ideas, right? I mean, this is all coming out of the blues and that they want to do. So they're sitting there trying to convince them, hey, look, Look how much fun they're having, punching this, punching that, and kicking this, kicking that, and right? It looks like they're having all kinds of fun. You got to exercise, and then, no, no, no. And then Susan ambushed me. Sometimes when your spouse kind of turn and look at you and say, oh, something's coming that I'm not gonna like. And she said, well, the kids will enjoy it if you sign up too, Samson. And the two kids say, yeah, Dad, yeah, that's a good idea. Okay. The end of the story was that all four of us took classes there. The moral of the story is, you are responsible. So if your child, if you're just really reluctant, be a part of your children's activity. But the key is that making sure they integrate it, they tie into communities of which that are meaningful to them, so that they can expand the network. Think about the Hebrews writer said, well, it kind of apply here too. In the Hebrews chapter 10, verse 25, do not neglect meeting together, what some are in the habit of doing, but encourage each other all the more as the day is approaching. So bringing your children, allow them to meet together. Now, remember all this stuff that we're talking about, modeling, teaching, and then taking time to integrate your children in communities. It takes time, doesn't it? And these days, who's got time? Nobody's got time. And time is this interesting commodity, right? When you think about time as a commodity, it's worthless. Because I can't say to you, well, tomorrow I got an extra half hour that I can sell. And by the way, I can sell you this half hour and I go into a void for half an hour. You tomorrow are going to have 24 and a half hours. Right? So you get to spend that, but give me money for it. I can't do that, so it's worthless. I can sell it. But I don't care how rich you are, how powerful you are, you can't buy it either. You can't say, come to me and say, hey, poor little guy, I know you need money. Here, I'm going to give you some money. I'm going to buy a day from you. Well, you can't buy from me. So it's priceless. You can't buy it. Doesn't matter how much money you put down. And yet, all of us got the same amount. And none of us can store it. You can't say, okay, all right, when I retire, I like to bank 5 years now and save it so I get double my time. You can't bank it. You spend it now or it's gone forever. And so all these qualities make time the most precious gift that you can give. So think about your children, your grandchildren, and you can show them and you tell them you are taking this precious commodity that you have and you spent it on them. You might not remember all the gifts that people give you, but I can tell you, you will remember when somebody had done something for you, gone out of the way, or be there, take the time to be there with you. I will never forget Jose and Anna offered me to go with me to my mother-in-law's nursing home to go sing hymns to her. And I will never forget that Jamie brought Josiah to my house when we were cleaning out the old house for 2 hours and helped me move furniture because my back, I couldn't move furniture that needed to move. All the times that Ben and Nathan, they got out there, and they rebuilt the stairs into the portable so we can walk in the portable. And you can tell that those two families combined, they have almost a football team. So they're busy. And yet they took the time to do that. Time. I remember those things that people would do for me. So think about your children. They will see and they know. When they see you take time to go to activities with them, for you to take time all of a sudden. Yesterday we were talking about pausing a movie. Paul Pesante said, well, we can pause a movie and talk about exactly what's on. I said, oh, wow, okay, that's cool, right? Time. They will remember that. So we as a parent, we as a grandparent, raising children as a Christian home, really the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is that when your child faces a scenario, what you really want them to do is stop and think, what would mommy and daddy do, and make the right decision. But when they don't, trust me, they won't at times. But when they fail, you want you to be the first they come and talk to and ask for guidance and advice. And if we can do that, we have successfully fulfilled that promise. But in the end, though, you've got to always remember, your children are adults in their own right. They make their own decisions, right? That our job is to bring them up in the training instruction of the Lord. Now, their job is continue to mature through faith in Christ to be a disciple. But we do our part. We give them the values and the hope to move forward and build the church the way it's intended to be. So may God bless all of us with our effort, with these precious little souls that we have with us, that He has given us, along with a command. That's what we need to do. So may God bless us all as we do that. Let us stand or sing. Let us stand and sing. Well, hold it.